But man, I feel like we're going to need to go beyond to make it through this next review.
Yes, we are. We are going to have to go beyond, beyond.
Beyond plot and characterization.
Watch. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. So we watched for our old movie review, uh, Star Trek Beyond, which is the third and for now final Star Trek movie in the J.J. Abrams Kelvin Timeline uh, era. Um,
Even
it,
though Paramount has made it an annual tradition to announce a fourth movie every single year to try to fool investors who aren't paying attention.
right, yeah, and thanks, Fat Boy, we appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, condolences is a good word for it. Because after watching The Creator, turning right to this, like, oh God.
Yeah. I don't know, for some reason I remember this movie being better than it was. Um,
Did you see that in theaters or?
I did see it in the theater. Yeah, that might be why. Um,
You
but
also probably, I mean, it is different watching something for the purposes of reviewing it rather than just watching it for raw enjoyment.
that's true. Yeah. But yeah, so Star Trek Beyond takes place. It's not quite 3 years after the events of Into Darkness. The Enterprise is almost 3 years into its 5-year mission. And it starts off with Kirk is trying to negotiate a peace treaty with these little aliens, and part of the treaty is that he's giving away this piece of like thing from an ancient weapon, and the little aliens don't take too kindly to it, and they attack Kirk, and in a comical, scene. Um,
I thought that was one of the more clever things in the movie, like, because you were just dealing with a very different alien psychology. Um, it's
yeah,
like, I'm here to give you a gift. Why? Why don't you want it anymore? What's wrong with it? Like the idea of a gift giving was foreign to them.
yeah, yeah, and then so he's like, you don't know these guys like we do. They're gonna do all this, and they're gonna eat us. Like what?
Right? And then it makes much more sense when you see them and, oh, you're tiny.
Yeah, and yeah, so they all attack him, and then he beams aboard the ship, and of course has the great little Star Trek fan service or scene where Kirk says, "Ah, I ripped my shirt again." Which if you watch the original series, every now and then Kirk will get into a fight and his shirt will get ripped.
Yeah.
And so then we kind of go a little forward, where Spock puts the little device in the vault, which sends a little signal to somebody that we don't know, and we get a little insight into the fact that Kirk is starting to get a little burned out with being a captain, um, as evidence from his captain's log, and then he has a little pre-dinner drink or pre-birthday drink with Bones, uh, and the scene is obviously meant to be a reminiscent or a homage to the scene in Wrath of Khan, where it's kind of the same thing, where Kirk has his birthday, but he's feeling really melancholy, and he doesn't know what he's supposed to do with his life.
Which
And
is weird because Kirk in this continuity would be in his like 30s.
yeah, and in Wrath of Khan, when Kirk was going through all that, he was 50. It's like, yeah, a little early for this Kirk to be having a midlife crisis.
Right. He's having a mid-mission crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then they arrive at although the other thing that bothered me about that scene was that Bones stole a bottle of scotch from Chekhov. Like,
Yeah, and they made a joke like, "Oh, I thought he'd be more into
and yeah,
The
we're into
vodka, racist.
yeah, yeah. So did they forget Kirk wasn't 60? Yeah, I guess so. um, yeah. So then they arrive at Starbase Yorktown, which is, as Bones rightfully points out, looks like a giant snow globe in space.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a bit of the one from Mass Effect.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the Citadel. Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the name.
Yeah, and so then when they're there, a ship arrives with an alien woman who tells this sob story about her ship crashing on a planet that's in a nebula that they've never charted. And so Kirk and the Enterprise fly off into the nebula to try to rescue this alien's crew, and then the proverbial excrement hits the fan, or in this case, a bunch of tiny little ships hit the Enterprise.
Yeah, and there's also I forget. Did you mention the plot line with Spock? Kind
Oh
of
no, I didn't. I didn't mention it. No.
the kind of the tribute to Leonard Nimoy.
Right. Yeah. 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 So Spock's going through a bit of a crisis himself. If you saw the first movie in this trilogy, you'll know what happened. If you didn't, Vulcan is destroyed, and there are only like like a handful of Vulcans left, and so he kind of feels like he has to be uh, trying to propagate the species more, and so as such he ends his relationship with Uhura, which was always weird to me to begin
Y-
with.
Yeah, it was always a weird choice in Star Trek because like the Trinity of Star Trek was always it was always Bones, Kirk, and Spock,
Yeah,
but Bones got shoved to the side in favor of Uhura.
yeah, which I didn't like at all, and neither did Carl Urban, who plays Bones in these movies.
Yeah,
Um,
understandable. I mean, poor
yeah,
guy keeps getting shafted. He does a great comic accurate version of Dread. No one goes to see it.
yeah, yeah. Although everybody seems to like the boys, so he's got that going for him.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the other part of it too. Was he finds out that Leonard Nimoy's Spock, the Spock from the other timeline, passed away. And this movie came out a couple years after Leonard Nimoy passed away in real life, so they were doing the tribute to him. Um, and of course, speaking of other actors who passed away before the movie came out, Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov in this movie, also
Yeah. Tragic accident.
tragic accident. But yeah, so Spock is basically trying to figure out what he wants to do, and Kirk and before they leave on the mission, Kirk talks with the Commodore on the starbase, and we learned that he wants to take the admiral position at the starbase, and he wants to
Which is
recommend Rod's recommend Spock for captain.
which is also weird for a 30-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Admiral. Yeah, most people don't make admirals until they're in their 50s. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah.
So they
They,
go back. Shit hits the fan. Huge swarm of drones.
right, huge swarm of drones. Uh, they're not sure, like what's going on, and then we meet the villain of the movie, whose name is Crawl. He's played by Idris Elba, and
Who I did not recognize under all the crap they kept putting on him.
no, I didn't either. Yeah, uh, yeah. A little slight spoiler: you actually do see him, as he normally looks near the end of the movie. But so he comes aboard the ship because he wants the piece of the uh, alien weapon that they have on the ship. Um, so he
Yeah,
just yeah.
isn't that so weirdly convenient that this guy needs the other half of his weapon and they just happened to have gotten it, and they almost gave it away to another species who, if they hadn't rejected the gift, boy, that would have been awkward.
Yeah. Yeah, where would he have been been then? Oof. Uh, he says, yeah, like Kroll, like the cheesy '80s movie. Yeah, I think it's spelled the same way. Yeah.
I
Um,
think it might have an A in it. Let's see here, Star Trek Beyond villain.
oh no, yeah, Kroll, K-R-A, yeah, K-R-A-L-L. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what Crawl really is he is a knockoff he's a knockoff of what do you call it, a con.
Con. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like the villains in these Kelvin Timeline movies, they're all just knockoffs of Khan. Even the Khan is a knockoff of Khan.
Yeah, which is an accomplishment. Um,
Yeah.
so it's at this point the movie hits the accelerator. Um, so- and I kept saying while we were watching it that the movie was exhausting to watch because it just does not let up for long periods of time.
No, it is very fast paced. It there yeah, there's no lull in there to like catch your breath for at least until probably not until like the five guys are on the old ship.
Yeah, there was like a scene with Spock and McCoy that I thought was kind of nice because they actually were talking about their characters a bit and what they were going to do with themselves. So
Yeah.
that was a moment that stuck out. But a lot of it was just a blur of action, 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 action. Oh, they captured the Enterprise. Uh, our heroes, our main cast has been split up. And main
Mhm.
character, and the main characters are like Kirk, Scotty, Spock, Chekhov. Was it Uhura,
Sulu.
Sulu? Although Sulu didn't really get to do much besides have a husband and a daughter in this one.
Yeah, which George Takei objected to. Even though, like George Takei, yes, he is a gay man, but he did not play Sulu as a gay man.
Right. So yeah, he did. I thought that was the most interesting thing about Sulu in this movie. Unfortunately, is
Yeah,
that out of movie thing.
right.
Now they also had a new character who is a all white alien, like actually like looks like Elric of Melbourne, played by Sophia Boutella of Rebel Moon infamy.
Yes, yeah. And it's yeah, and like Idris Elba, it's hard to recognize her underneath all that makeup.
Yeah, so I'll say that they at least were kind of creative with the alien character design for this one.
Yeah, they did. And the part where when Scotty is about to be attacked by a couple of aliens, and then Jayla comes and saves him, they looked a lot like orcs or goblins.
Yeah. And by the way, isn't it a funny coincidence that Simon Pegg was one of the two writers on this movie? And he happened to have some romantic tension with Sophia Boutella.
Yeah,
Boy,
yeah,
it's weird how that happened.
yeah. Funny how that works. Yeah.
Because basically her character had crashed on the planet many years ago and had been slowly rebuilding um, a old an old what do you call it,
It was
Starfleet ship.
yeah, it was an NX class starship. If you watched Star Trek Enterprise, that's that class of ship.
I thought it looked familiar. Okay.
Yeah, that's the yeah the I guess a later model of it because that ship was like the NX 300 something, um, and um, and the whole thing too with yeah, they mentioned like the Makos, which was a military assault command, and they were kind of like a special forces group. They show up in season 3 of Enterprise,
Hmm.
yeah, they mentioned the Zindi War, that was the third season.
Okay, I thought that sounded kind of familiar.
Yeah,
Yep.
but yeah, so she's kind of slowly building the ship back up, um, and yeah, Ninja, yeah, Simon Pegg wrote a self-gratifying speech.
Yep. And
Yeah,
she even kind of has almost like Starfire qualities, and that she's kind of a fish out of water and doesn't quite understand some of what's going on.
yeah. Um, and yeah, and then and how human names work. You know, because because Scotty says, "I'm Montgomery Scott," and call me Scotty, and she's like, "All right, Montgomery Scotty."
Yeah. Uh,
Fat Boy says, he said, do a Klingon movie, no Federation, just Klingons wrecking stuff.
Oh, that would require creativity.
Yes, but what I say to that is Kapla. Uh,
Yeah. So I think so. Like we were saying, this is a very exhaustingly paced movie,
yeah,
and you know what actually reminded me of, and this is going to be a really insulting comparison,
yeah.
was Rise of Skywalker,
Mm.
because it is
Uh,
kind of like a series of video game fetch quests.
it is, yeah, very much so. And when you were talking about the pace of it and hitting the accelerator, it sort of reminded me of it reminded me of the fact that Justin Lin, who's the director of the movie, directed several Fast and Furious movies. So
Okay.
that might explain a lot of the pacing with the issues with this movie.
Right, because like I think you could do a Star Wars movie at this type of breakneck speed. Star Trek used to be more of a cerebral show.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And, I did my when I did a review of I'll put it in the corner up here, and hopefully this time I'll remember to do it. My review of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was a cerebral movie, probably the only cerebral movie that started in the franchise. Because they did Wrath of Khan, which had a villain in it, and that was really popular. So from then on out, every Star Trek movie had to have a villain in it.
Yep,
Yeah.
for good or for ill.
Yes.
Well, I guess four had more like four
For
was probably the most like the first one, really.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and yeah. That movie was more of a that movie was more cerebral, and it was also more of a comedy. But
Uh, Right. Um, and so we're gonna spoil the hell out of this movie. So if you
oh
don't want
yes,
to see
yeah.
that, we our general conclusion is we do not recommend.
No, unfortunately, I don't recommend it. Yeah,
Now,
it's
I could see why you would enjoy it more in the theater
mhm.
because if you don't have any distractions and you aren't thinking about it in like a reviewer sense, I could see being entertained by the moment to moment action and like every character gets to do something. It's just
Yeah. I would say that is a positive of this movie is that every character in the movie, every member of the crew gets their moment. I mean, maybe aside from Sulu, but most of them have something to do in it. You know.
right. And Sulu at least gets to pilot the ship some in some.
Yeah.
Man, they destroy so many digital rocks in this movie.
Yeah.
Good thing space metal is stronger than rock mountains.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a little.
Yeah. Okay. So spoilers. If you don't care about it,
Yeah.
three, two, one.
Yeah.
So Crawl is again they just happened to have the other half of his doomsday weapon, which is more like a biological agent.
Yes.
And he kills the alien who did the Judas goat thing and led them there on the promise that they would save her crew quite
Right.
messily with that weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very odd. Yeah. Didn't like that. But yeah. And then uh, so his whole plan was to destroy Yorktown, and
And his reason for it is that's where he's the Khan ripoff because Starfleet left him buried alive, buried
yes.
alive.
Yeah, so yeah, so mate, so yeah, Crawl is his real name is Balthazar Edison, and he was the captain of the Franklin, the old ship that they're all on. and used to be in the military, and then when the Federation was formed, and Starfleet basically absorbed that military. And is Starfleet's not military. Its mission is exploration and scientific research.
Right.
Uh,
Just
yeah,
just with the occasional space fight mixed in.
right. So to reward Edison, they for all of his efforts, they gave him command of the Franklin, but he was not pleased with that because he's a soldier, he's not an explorer, uh, and uh, and something happened. I can't remember what it was. I think like the ship got caught in like a wormhole or something, and that ended up crashing on this planet. And then his crew all dies except for him, and he finds some life preserving technology on there which keeps him alive for 100 years.
And mutates him into a weird looking monster.
Yes.
Uh,
um
I should
yeah,
say that his whole crew doesn't die because like he has a bunch of minions who like weren't his crewmen also turned into the weird aliens?
maybe,
'Cause-
probably, maybe a couple of them.
Yeah, like he has like dozens of minions and
Yeah.
or at least he has a large number of minions and
Yeah, and
uh,
it's never really established if like they were like members of his crew, or if they were like other aliens that crashed on the planet and then they started working for him.
yeah, like
It's
I remember
Yeah.
in the logs they found of him, they said that only three members had survived.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So it's weird and not. If it was explained, I was checked out and bored by that point.
Yeah. Are they yellow and tried to steal the moon? No. No, they're not the minions, unfortunately. That would actually be a fun movie.
Yes, roughly about the same level of intelligence, though.
Yeah.
Um, so the the, the crew, so basically, he manages to. He didn't have the Enterprise. What ship? No, he was flying one of the drone ships. That's right.
Yeah.
So he basically is able to, because he has the other half of this weapon. He is now ready to launch his invasion um, uh, of that place of that space station. So
Yeah.
he and his drone army that they call the bees
Yeah.
fly out there, and our crew has to try to stop them with these piddly little antique weapons when they earlier couldn't actually deal with them
Right. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
modern weapons.
Right. Yeah. And you pointed it out too and when you were watching it, it's like Spock in at the beginning of the movie says, "Captain, we're not equipped for this manner of engagement," and your response was, "Why not, you stupid bastard?"
Okay. Why not?
What? Yeah. Cha- yeah. Channeling uh, uh, yeah, whatever, American Psycho. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and but also it's like, well, Mr. Spock, you see, the enemy is currently coming at us in a huge wave, so it doesn't really matter if we're prepared for this or not. We kind of have to make do with what we have.
Yeah.
Well, and also, isn't it a coincidence that the advanced aliens who abandoned a planet that still had a bunch of mining material left on it left behind a bunch of intact working drone ships that happens to be more like these were presumably mining drone ships that were more advanced than what the Federation had, and were able to soak up photon torpedoes and phaser fire like it was going out of style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, hell of a coincidence. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the heroes go, and you have a bit where Spock and McCoy are on a captured drone for reasons I didn't quite understand.
They needed to figure out the frequency that
Oh, right.
the ships were all communicating with each other, and so they had to get on one of the ships. But Spock, you remember, Spock was hurt, so
Yeah,
Bones had to go with him, even though Bones was not happy about it.
right. But Bones in this version is kind of a scared hypochondriac.
Yeah, and he's never liked the
Right. He's afraid of space
transporters.
travel. That's right.
Yeah, he's very space rally. He doesn't like transporters, which in this series they didn't get to until this movie, when he's like, "Oh, yeah, have my damn atoms scattered all over space."
Right. Right, like they brought it up a little bit in the 2009 first movie, but not a whole lot since.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, but
And the way they defeat okay, so the visuals in this movie are very pretty.
mhm.
That's its strength in my opinion. So you have this scene where like the drones have formed into like a surf wave and are descending on the ship on the space station,
Yeah.
and the heroes figure out that they're communicating on was it UHF no VHF
UHF. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah radio frequencies, which seems
Yeah.
like an odd flex for aliens, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
And so one of the waifu aliens quirks was that she had a bunch of old Earth music that she'd been listening to in her isolation, and Spock, of course, or sorry, Scotty, of course, can't figure it out, so she has to go in and plug it in, and they blast Beastie Boys. Uh,
uh,
can't stand it.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
your body. Sabotage. That's it.
Sabotage. Yeah.
They're busting sabotage, and it looks like the Enterprise is surfing up through space. It's surfing up this cresting wave of alien drones.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, as soon as I guess it makes enough, like a little bit of sense
Hmm.
that if you have the ships flying that close to each other, disrupting their communications and coordination at all would just make them start crashing into each other. But the way they were portraying it, it was almost like the radio waves were just flat out making them explode.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course the use of sabotage was a callback to the 2009 movie.
That's right. The scene with the motorcycle,
No, well, no, it was when Kirk, when he's a kid,
right?
he
He steals the car. That's right.
steals a car and takes it for a joyride, and yeah, he's playing this
Yeah.
song on the radio. Yeah.
And but the crawl gets through, and then they proceed to have a running fight in the space station, trying to stop him from delivering the super weapon to the wrong place.
Right. Yeah. And then Kirk and Crawl have a fist fight in the life support thing because he's trying to unleash the weapon up there, and then the two of them have kind of like this philosophical debate about
Which comes the frig out of nowhere.
yeah. Well, because it's Star Trek, they have to have some kind of philosophical, cerebral moment, and you know,
Even if the rest of the movie has brain has brainworms or something, it's
yeah, it's just like
right. It's like it's because in the previous scene they found out that he was a soldier,
mhm,
and it's like, oh, humanity is a warlike species. We just need to embrace that. And
yeah,
Starfleet isn't was a mistake. And Kirk's like, no, Starfleet's awesome.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We can solve our problems peacefully as he's proceeding to beat the crap out of Idris Elba.
yeah, 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 and but they uh Kirk eventually saves the day, or they all save the day, I guess, and then Idris Elba gets blown out into space and gets consumed by the bioweapon, and I guess they just kind
Truly,
of live. I guess
truly an ironic ending.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and then Kirk decides to stay as the captain of the Enterprise, and I guess Spock decides to stay on the Enterprise as well, because they're giving them a new Enterprise, which is the Enterprise A.
Yeah, because like, was there a movie in the series where a just Enterprise was not destroyed, or am I misremembering because they kept destroying the Enterprise in the Next Generation movies?
Um, well, okay, so the Enterprise is destroyed in three movies: The Search for Spock, Generations, and this movie. In the other movies, the Enterprise is either gets really badly damaged or isn't working properly in the case of the motion picture and the Final
Five.
Front. Yeah, and five. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Uh, Yeah, so they get a new Enterprise, and they have something that feels like the ending of this continuity.
yeah. It did.
Like, as he's giving a speech about continuing to go out there, and
Yeah,
but like it feels like a conclusion, which makes the threats of a fourth movie all the funnier.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they kind of didn't keep it open ended, just in maybe just in case, like maybe we should kind of give it something of an ending, and just in
Yeah,
case the
well, the
movie
last
doesn't.
one, I mean, the thing with those movies is that they were never as successful as the budgets they were made for would require.
Right.
But this one in particular was just an outright bomb.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Um, yeah, it came out in 2016, and I think it either came out before, it came out right around the same time as Ghostbusters. Um, and I can't remember what else came out right around that time too, but it had some pretty stiff competition. Um, but yeah.
Well, and also the previous movie in the series had been a knockoff of Khan. I don't think that won a lot of people over.
No, no, you're right. Yeah, there were a lot of people who were really ticked off with the previous movie, and they're like, I don't want to go see this movie. Yeah.
Which, having never seen that one, Daniel, would you say this one is better or worse than Not Khan?
This one's better. So that should tell you something about the other movie.
Oof. Yeah, like I say, this isn't a hateful movie. It's just not a Star Trek movie, properly speaking.
No, and I don't think really any of the Kelvin Timeline movies are proper Star Trek movies. They are they're sci-fi action movies.
Right. Which is like Star Trek can play in that,
Yeah.
but it isn't its home.
No, yeah, and yeah, like you were saying before, it's always been very a cerebral series. It's meant to be about the human condition and what and playing on different themes and the movies by and large tend to be adventure movies to a certain extent, but they will delve into the more cerebral philosophical stuff, and even doing like real world stuff, and in the case of uh Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, which was that whole movie was basically just an allegory for the end of the Cold War.
Right. So, like, if I had to compare this to, like, say, oh, well, let's compare it to the creator. I would say that they have different flaws.
Hmm.
Like, I would say that the creator was trying to be smarter than it actually was.
Yeah.
This movie was very comfortable living in the brain dead zone it had created for itself. It kind of had character arcs. It kind of had a story, but it was really just there for a bunch of set pieces that would look awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And plenty of loud action scenes to try to keep people interested.
Yeah, I do think it's funny in retrospect that Zoe Saldana might be the most accomplished sci-fi actress of all time,
Yeah.
just because of these movies and Avatar. Like,
Yeah.
like
and
she
and yeah.
is there, oh, is there that one I'm forgetting?
Well,
Oh, and Guardians.
I was gonna mention the MCU, the
Yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah,
yeah. Although this is the only one where she isn't painted a weird color.
that's true. Yeah,
So, which is interesting because like if she had kind of had the least to do in this movie, it's almost like they broke her and Scott and Spock up to free up room for Bones. Now that I think about it.
probably. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's yeah.
but I say, yeah, it's a very brain dead movie. Its idea of how to make Spock sound smart is to basically make him into Mr. Data, where he comes off like a robot who doesn't understand human customs at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bones says, "Okay, I'll cut the horse shit," and Spock says, "I fail to see how excrement of any kind is relevant to our current situation."
Right. Like that is not a Spock line. Like you pointed out, that is a Data line.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's but again, like if I compare it to Creator, I was bored with both of them. Watching them back to back was not a good time.
yeah, yeah,
If you put a gun to my head and forced me to watch one of these again, I would probably choose the Creator just because I think that one. because that one is trying to be smart, it would be more fun to pick apart its logical inconsistencies or world building issues, or there might be things that we missed the first time around that a second viewing would give us context for.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just a pile of popcorn.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. 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 Well, I've said all I need to say about this movie.
Yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.